Hey everybody, this is Roberto Blake of RobertoBlake.com helping you create something awesome today. So today we're actually going to do some story time, and maybe this will help you guys in your journey of creating awesome. We're going to do story time on how I got started in YouTube. Now, the way I got started in YouTube actually is very interesting. I actually got started back in YouTube around when it first came out, but that was on a completely different channel, and I was actually doing anime music videos. And that was something that I just found was fun, and I was doing that long before YouTube ever came out. I'm 31 years old, so I've been doing video stuff and editing for over 15, 16 years now. Now, the cool thing about doing that type of content is back in the day, there really wasn't anybody on YouTube doing big things, and so everything was interesting and everything was new. Subscriber counts and view numbers, none of that stuff really mattered. There wasn't advertising yet per se. I mean, this was just a very different space. The cool thing about this was just knowing that that work was out on the internet and I could share it with all of my friends whenever I wanted to. So that was kind of cool for me and interesting. Now, later, I actually started getting more into actually doing real YouTube content where I was actually doing stuff in front of the camera. I was using a Sony HD Bloggy, and my first video on this channel is still out there. It's from 6 years ago. I've only been doing YouTube consistently for the last 2 years because I had this huge gap period where I never did any content. Like, there was like a whole 2 years I never did any content. I just had an account so I could comment on people's stuff. Most people actually started in YouTube like that, to be honest. So what happened with me was I did some camera stuff about the Sony HD blog. I answered some questions about it, and believe it or not, those are still some of the highest viewed videos on the channel to this day, probably just because of how old they are. But what happened after that was years later, I started doing some more stuff that was graphic design based. I started talking about my career in the early days and stuff that was happening. I think I did some videos on like getting featured in Photoshop Creative or Advanced Photoshop magazine, just different things. And I kept coming back to that and doing that every now and again for a few years, but never really taking it too seriously. In July of 2013, I want to say, in July of 2013 is when I started actually taking YouTube seriously, and I decided to commit to weekly YouTube video content. And my weekly content was Photoshop tutorial videos. I wanted to help other people learn this stuff in Photoshop. I wasn't satisfied with all the tutorials that were out there. There were a few people who were doing tremendous work, people like Howard Pinsky, but other people were not doing as good a job per se, and Howard couldn't do everything. He couldn't do every single video to cover every single thing, I don't think, nor would he have the interest in that. I was more into like photo manipulation and things like that, so I started doing tutorials that were based in the techniques that I used, especially things I used doing the ad agency work that I had to do. So that was where I got my start. And then from there, I started talking more about the graphic design profession. A lot of you really got into that. I started doing the occasional video about what gear I was using. I saw that got traction. Then I started talking about, at some point, how this whole YouTube thing was working out for me. I started talking about other programs besides Photoshop. I started talking about what I was doing with Premiere Pro, and I started showing stuff from my After Effects reel. And you guys really got into that. So I started really thinking about the direction and the strategy for my channel and what I wanted to do. And my channel ended up growing into not a graphic design channel, but a how-to channel because I'm more than a graphic designer. I was doing photography and traditional illustration and video editing before I ever got into graphic design and web design. I was actually a web designer before I was ever a print designer and before I was ever doing photo manipulation. I was doing HTML code at 13. I was developing film in a darkroom at 10. I got into photography and wedding video editing back around 14 and 15 when that was like my first real like after school and summer job. So I was doing that. So that's where I really got my start. Graphic design would come later. That would come at like, 16, 15, 16, something in that neighborhood. Mostly off of, I would argue that I dabbled in it as a web designer at 13, mostly Paint Shop Pro and ULED, which became Corel and things like that. But I started going into graphic design more in my later teens. In the early days, it was all this other stuff. It was all the photography and the video and the illustration and web design and coding and video editing. It was all that stuff first. So it's not that I branched off from graphic design to that. It's the other way around. So I started focusing the channel on what all of my creative skills were and how I could help other people grow and develop those. And that's what you see the content is today. That's why on Mondays I do the graphic design stuff. And then on Tuesdays I do tech. when I was 13 and we got the first real computer into the house, I started upgrading it myself. I started cannibalizing parts from people who were downgrading. I started flipping stuff on eBay. That's where a lot of the hustle and the entrepreneurial stuff comes from. I've been doing an entrepreneur hustle since I was a kid. I've always had side businesses or even a full-time freelance career, even in college and things like that. So I've always been very business-minded and marketing-minded. Those videos are not something where I jumped on a bandwagon. So that's where the Saturday social media and small business videos come from. They come from the fact that I was that kid at 13 years old, back when eBay was new, like 15, 16 years ago, plus I'm 31 now, so it's something in that time period. It's back in the AOL age. I was doing selling Magic the Gathering cards and Yu-Gi-Oh cards on the internet back then. I was also flipping that stuff at flea markets and at the lunch table in school. I was buying, what was I doing? I was going to the grocery store and I was buying cases of soda in the bulk and then carrying them in my gym bag and then selling them to kids at school because we didn't have vending machines back then. So I was like selling them for double and triple the money, and I was doing really good with that. For what a kid is. So, I mean, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. That's where my marketing and my salesmanship stuff comes from. I've been doing it my whole life. I just translated that content into stuff here for the YouTube channel. So that's where, social media and small biz Saturdays come from. I like to do story time like this. So that's where the vlogging on Sundays came from. You guys know that now I've been doing the video editing and photography forever. That's where the Wednesday videos come from. And then Thursdays, it's back to my roots in YouTube. It's back to the tutorial videos, whether that's Photoshop or something else. I've been doing the web design series a little bit for you guys lately. On Thursdays, I also like to do other videos that are focused either on branding or something else. I like to mix it up on Thursdays. So now you know how I got started in YouTube. You know where all this different content came from. You know a little bit more about me and what my beginnings were. So I hope that answers the question of how did I get started in YouTube? I guess the other question becomes like stuff about the equipment. I've talked about that before. I shoot on Nikon D3200. That's what I've been shooting on since 2013. It's a great camera. For me, it was an upgrade from my other Nikon that was only for photography. That was my second camera for a long time until I got another one. So it's things like that. For the live vlogging, obviously I use the Logitech C920. I upgraded from a 2-bulb lighting kit to 2 lighting kits that have 5 bulbs apiece. I have links to all of my equipment in the description below. I'll do an equipment video later if I haven't done that enough already. But my point is, I started with simple things. I started with like a little $200 camcorder, and that was it when I first started years ago. After that, I got a few other little camcorders, microphones, little things that I picked up here and there, and I grew my inventory, and I grew the channel, and I grew my content. And that's what it is. Everybody starts at zero, my friends. Gary Vaynerchuk says this all the time, and it's true. Everybody starts at zero. I got my start, and now you know how. Oh, just FYI, Crush It is sitting here on the desk. I did not read this in 2009 when it came out. I wish I had. I'd probably be in a very different place if I had. I read this book last year, and for me, it was not the life-changing thing that would be for many of you. This book, for me, was confirmation that I'm not insane. So, just take that for what it is. Now you know my story, and now you know my humble YouTube beginnings. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it gives you some insight for your own creative journey. If you have questions, leave those in the comment section. I'll try and answer as many of them as I can. Anyway, like this video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out the other awesome content on the channel. As always, you guys, thanks so much for watching, and don't forget, create something awesome today.